Greetings. I will share with you today the doctrine of Jesus Christ. So, this topic I have introduced because it's a very important topic. It might seem as though maybe it's a common word, doctrine of Jesus, because I understand a lot of preachers might have said something to do with the doctrine of Jesus. But however, I would like you to be patiently attentive to what I'm going to share with you today, because it's going to open up to our learning. It's going to open up to a very, very important realization of the purpose of God in our lives, right? So initially, I'm going to make an attestation for the doctrine to make proof, to substantiate why do we need to know of the doctrine of Jesus Christ. Why is the doctrine of Jesus Christ so important? Firstly, I would like to tell you that it is out of the realization that we are of one God and we are of He who made the heavens and earth, our Maker. All of us, whether we be whites, whether we be blacks, whether we be Indians, or whatever place where we may be found on the globe, we are all of one God. And we are all supposed to submit to He who made us, to He who created us, to He who also promised that we should be gathered unto Him. So the doctrine is going to guide us into all those aspects. However, now being premised on the fact that we are of one God, we want also to seek to know the doctrine of Jesus Christ. First, Jesus being a prophet, being a messenger, being a Messiah of all the world. Jesus is He who came and brought the message from God. And Jesus is He also who had been testified, who had been prophesied of fellow messengers or fellow prophets who came before Him. All those who came before Jesus had actually prophesied of Him, and they also which came after also testified that Jesus was indeed a prophet sent from God, a messenger sent from God. He was the Messiah of all the world, because this is confirmed in the Quran as well of Jesus. This is also confirmed in the book of the prophets which came before Jesus came. So Jesus becomes the center of our evaluation, or the center of our introspection into the purpose of God as concerning mankind. Jesus came and said His doctrine was not His doctrine, but the doctrine of He who sent Him, the doctrine of God. So the doctrine of God being given to Jesus now is going to help us to understand, one, the commandment of God; two, the purpose of God as concerning mankind. Also, it's going to give us an enlightenment into what is it that we should do then concerning that which God gave us. What is it that we should do concerning our destiny, concerning where we should be in the place of the ways to God. Are there so many ways to God? We have to evaluate that. Or are there many laws, or are there many commandments? Are there many doctrines? As it is today, you may see that among the Christian preachers, there are many doctrines, sectorial churches, each saying his own different ways concerning the way by which we can get to God. Was it so with Jesus? Is there a misunderstanding in the messages that Jesus then preached? So we must look into all those things. The good thing is, all that which Jesus taught was recorded and is there in the scriptures. Or also that was said before Jesus came is recorded in the scriptures of the Bible. Then we also have other messengers which came after Jesus. Besides the apostles, we do have the Quran itself also stating, also mentioning of Jesus, also enlightening of that which Jesus had taught. So all these messengers are coming from one God and understanding the law of God will help us understand every messenger, not just those which are recorded in the scriptures or in the Quran, as I have mentioned, but also other messengers which are found at different other places. However, let's first focus on the doctrine of Jesus Christ. If we learn the doctrine of Jesus Christ, we have an evaluator of all men who claim, who state to have been sent of God. Also, if we learn the doctrine of Jesus Christ, we're going to establish the harmony, we're going to establish the reconciliation of that which is written in the scriptures, first the Old Testament scriptures themselves, and the Gospels, also the Quran itself. Because remember, there's this which I'm trying to come onto. It was mentioned already in the Quran, for instance, because the Quran does mention that all things that was taught in the Gospels of Jesus, all things that was said of the prophets of old, be it Moses, David, or any other prophet that came, who are recorded in the Tanakh Bible, all of them, they are speaking the same message as that which Muhammad did taught. So Prophet Muhammad did state that the Quran itself was an enlightenment to that which is taught of Jesus, to that which was taught and instructed by various other prophets which came before him. So all I will seek to have is to give you the doctrine, to give you the knowledge of the doctrine, so that you can know and then will be able to validate these reconciliations, to agree in one with Muhammad, to agree in one with also Jesus, to say, truly our God is one God, and this is what binds us. This is the reconciling factor. This is going to make known to men that truly the message that God spake is one message. So our God being one, we are bound to have one law. And that's the confidence where I'm going to premise this discussion to say, we are surely supposed to come to understand God in his oneness, in him being the one who brought us here, in him being the one who knows the purpose, the creator of the heavens and earth, our maker. So this is the way by which I'm going to tackle this teaching. First of all, I will seek to validate the importance of the doctrine as it is. I think I've already started to enlighten in matters to say, why then do we need the doctrine? Why then should we have the doctrine? Because we seek to interpret, we seek to evaluate, we seek to know the purpose of man. Then later on, after that, I'm sure I'm going to then tell you where are we having an error? Where is it that we are made to go away from the doctrine? What is the factor that is leading us to have a divided way of understanding God? Why are we then divided? Since these books have already existed with us, the Bible itself and the Quran, but men have not been able to reconcile them. Partly, yes, I will share also it's because of it. It was because of the time. But after that time I've done so, I also discuss on the elements which are then taught of men, why are men teaching other things. Then I'm also going to then test those things that men teach against that which was written, either in the Bible itself or by the work of Jesus, and later on in the Quran as well, to say and also rebut everything that is taught that makes or that brings such kind of a confusion among the messengers of God. So we want to bring rapport to that which the Lord our God have spoken to us. We want to seek to entrench the evidences that are there to say, no, God is not variable. His law certainly is not divided. We have one God who gave us one law, and he is the one who has spoken through all these messengers, and is seeking to gather us toward him according to his purpose. So I will graphically show for now the messengers which came, and then after that I have shown the messengers which came. I'm also going to then discuss anything else that is taught other than the doctrine. So just brace for now as I show you the messengers. So this is what I have shown concerning the messengers which came from God, right? So you are going to see that over time we had many messengers which came before Jesus, because Jesus ministered during this era of the Gospels. But before then, we had Moses and the prophets. Then by way of the chronology, you are going to see that we have, from this dispensation, we have Jesus ministering here, then the apostles, and also Islam. But all these ministrations, they relied on that which had been spoken either in the books of Moses and the prophets, that is in the Tanakh Bible, and also the Gospels and the apostles. So Islam basically would include all these books which were written before. But there are other religions that I didn't include for now, by naming I mean, but I included them as blank spaces here. The mentioning of them or the labeling of them would happen later, because these are religions which are not yet, maybe for now, I'm yet to introduce them as they are to people. But there are many other religions which would happen at different other places. Like the African tradition, you will find there, and so I just left them, but they can be represented by these blank pages. But all these religions were ministering us a light so that we can come here to the true light of God, or come to heaven, or be spiritual, that is, to be able to relate with the one who made us, to be related with God who created us. And that ministration would come from these religions which would appear here to give us the ultimate course to the light. So I can actually mention for now that this was a progression. The Gospels, the Apostles, Islam, then coming here would actually then receive the ultimate access into the light that God had promised. So men were coming from an earthly perspective, practicing throughout religions, because all these are religions, and these as well. But as long as we're within the religions, we are still far away from the light. And as long as we're still in the religions, we are yet to get to heaven. We're yet to be able to relate to God, who is heavenly, or who is spiritual. Or so these things have I also portrayed to say, if we know the doctrine, that is, if we know what Jesus was teaching, we are then going to be able to evaluate any other messenger who had been sent of God. We are then going to be able to evaluate every other book that had been sent of God. So anyone who states to have been sent of God should truly abide in the law or in the commandment of God, because we are confident of the fact that we are all of one God. So says also these messengers, because this extraction, I'm not getting it from my head. It's there in the books, either the books of the prophets, or in the books, the Gospels, or the books of the Apostles, or the Quran. These things have been stated to say that we are of one God, and that understanding should bind us. And being of one God, it means our law should be one. The commandment of our God surely is not variable. So as it had been spoken in Jesus, or to Jesus, surely it's the same law that had been spoken to Muhammad in the Quran, or to Moses, or any other prophet, or any other place where things of God have been spoken. So the doctrine will be the evaluator, because it is the commandment of God, and being one God, surely it should be able to evaluate every work of any prophet at any given place. So maybe just behind this, I have left out the other religions, maybe to do with the Greek mythology, the Roman mythology, or religions in India there, or maybe the African tradition, as I've mentioned. I've just left them, but we'll include them later on. I've just included those religions in which we have books that were given among the living to guide us to God. Prophets which actually would speak and would actually speak as a progression, because you're actually going to see that all these prophets which spake in the Tanakh Bible, in the Tanakh book, they were actually, a progression. The same again by the time we get to the Gospels and the books of the Apostles, they were a progression as well. And Quran also, the Quran is also a progression from the ministrations that we receive in the Gospels and the ministration of the Apostles, because the Quran does mention that it's an enlightenment to the books of the prophets and the Gospels. So these books are a progression, and at the same time, they are the books that were wrote by those messengers who were sent from God. So that's why I included these ones, because I will later on teach you and make you understand the fact that the Bible and the Quran are the book of books. It's only the Bible and the Quran which forms the foundation for every other book that had been written under the sun, or for every other message that have come from God, because the Quran and the Bible does state the fundamentals of every other book that would be written under the sun. So you're going to see that the world as it is today is not it's not giving this picture, or it's not being able to reconcile the things that Jesus taught and the things that Prophet Muhammad did taught. Actually, you're actually going to see from certain aspects of expressions which are there in these books, that there seems to be, or maybe to an unlearned someone, they seem to be disparaging works from the two different books. Also, maybe the fact that facts of them, they seem not to be agreeing. It's all because people don't understand the doctrine of Jesus Christ. Otherwise, if people know the doctrine, they would iron out all those differences or seemingly different perspectives. There are no differences in those books. Those books actually are speaking one and the same message. Instead, it's actually a progression, or the Quran itself is an enlightenment to the things that Jesus spoke. So this is what I'm going to be presenting to you. I'm going to be teaching you the doctrine of Jesus Christ, so that you can be able to create or reveal that which always have existed before God. That is the rapport or the harmony between all the messengers that came from God. There have always been harmony between these messengers, because their message is coming from one God, and they themselves also, they are in submission to the doctrine of God, and that doctrine is the one which shaped these ministrations at various places during different times. Okay. So from the bold understanding that I brought to say that the Quran itself and the scriptures of the Bible, it's one message. This is just a restatement that I am doing, because these things are stated in the Quran. I'm going to then show you from the doctrine itself where and how these things are the same. So I want you to be patient in terms of how then you are supposed to learn the doctrine, because it is actually some long way. By nature, it is supposed to be that people should first have believed Moses for them to understand the prophets. Then also they were supposed to believe Moses and the prophets for them to understand Jesus. And then if they would understand Jesus, they would understand also the ministration of the apostles. And if they believed the ministration of Jesus and the ministration of the apostles, then were they able to relate with that which is written in the Quran. So that's exactly how the progression was. So now that that's not the position, the world right now cannot reconcile these messages together. It's also going to mean that I'm going to take you quite a lengthy exercise, but it's not so lengthy, not as fierce. I think it's just a friendly and an enlightening way into understanding the things of God. So I hope to make that short. I will use the very simplest, the very plainest way of explaining these things. But at the same time, I will assure you that you won't lack in understanding the things of God. You are actually going to be brought into oneness with whatever messenger that have ministered these things, because these messengers and these people, they did understand. To say maybe people of the Quran, they understood that this was the same message to that which Jesus had ministered. What is it then that had blocked this understanding from being with men over time? Basically, I will just mention the reasons to start with. It was not yet the time. God had appointed this understanding to be shared at this particular point in time. He allowed men to be exercised in so many religions, in vain activities of religion, so that someday would come where men would be gathered together to God. In other aspects, this is told as the coming of men to God, so that men would be told what they were doing. So men were then supposed to be told what they were doing inside religions after such a time, and this is the time. But however, this understanding or these teachings are not bringing in a new knowledge or a new understanding altogether. It's the understanding that have always been there in the scriptures. It's the understanding that have always been there in the written work of the messengers of God. So what is it then that is making the messengers seem to be contradictory one to another? What is it that is not helping people to have harmony between the scriptures, Jesus himself, and the Quran, and many other religions that are spread across the world? It is because people don't understand the law of God. It is because people don't understand the purpose of God. And this purpose is enshrined in the doctrine of Jesus Christ. So I will teach the doctrine of Jesus Christ. I will seek to establish the doctrine, so that by having the doctrine, we can then be having a measure or an evaluator into every man's work who claim or who is stated to have received this message from God. Everyone who receives the message of God should be evaluated by the doctrine, because the doctrine is of God, the doctrine is the purpose of God, the doctrine is what God stated, right? And our God is one God. Why Jesus? Jesus is the one who has been spoken of by the prophets of old, who prophesied of him. When he came also, he confirmed the message of those prophets, and when he went and resurrected, he also have his message confirmed by the ministration of the apostles. In the Quran also, it is also stated that Jesus is the Messiah, and truly Jesus is the Messiah of all the world, the living and the dead. That's why we start on the law of Jesus. We start on the doctrine that Jesus received of God. And if we have that, we can then be able to understand all the other messengers. That's why we're starting on Jesus. So the doctrine of Jesus is stated in the book of Hebrews chapter 6, verse 1 and 2. The doctrine is it. As it is stated, I will just read the book of Hebrews chapter 6. Therefore, leaving the principles of the doctrine of Christ, let us go on unto perfection, not laying again the foundation of repentance from dead works, and of faith toward God, of the doctrine of baptisms, and of laying on of hands, and of resurrection of the dead, and of eternal judgment. And this we will do if God permit. So these are the six. So the doctrine is not something that we must then deduct out of scripture, or maybe search through the scriptures to establish as laws for a sectorial church. For that's what the Christians are doing. Every sector or every branch which one seeks to establish in the name of Christianity, they then divide the law, or they then extract whatever they title to be a church doctrine or to be a church commandment. They then pull that to be the doctrine. But is it so with the doctrine? Certainly not. The doctrine is stated specifically in the scriptures. And this is the scripture where the doctrine of Jesus Christ is stated and is also separated into principles or the founding frameworks. So we are going to base whatever that we are going to learn on these founding principles to get enlightenment into the doctrine. So why then do we have anything else other than the doctrine? It's because they which are teaching are not teaching the doctrine of Jesus Christ, but they are seeking something else other than the doctrine. Let me read the book of Mark chapter 7 verse 6 to verse 8. And he answered and said unto them, well, hath Elias prophesied of you hypocrites, as it is written, these people honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Howbeit in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. For laying aside the commandment of God, you hold the tradition of men, as the washing of pots and cups, and many other such like things do you. So these are the things that, these are the statements that then guide us to say, everyone that is not going to be teaching the doctrine of God, everyone that is not going to be teaching the law of God, will be found teaching vain commandments of men. Commandments of men are being replaced for the doctrine. As it were in the days then when Jesus preached, the same is happening this day. The same which prophesied, for which were false prophets, the same again now are false teachers among men, teaching for doctrine the commandments of men. They neglect those six which are mentioned in the book of Hebrews and start teaching something else. Whenever they have scriptures, whenever they have one or two or three scriptures that they can establish their position, they can then call that a commandment or a doctrine. Whatever then that they will be teaching is simply a replacement of doctrine, a disobedient exercise wherein they neglect or they set aside the doctrine. So the same again was spoken. You can check also Matthew chapter 15 verse 9. It's the same story. But I just wanted to establish that all those who are teaching anything else other than the doctrine, they are replacing the doctrine by the commandments of men. So I now seek to explain what are the commandments of men in light of the activities that were happening inside religions. So I'm going to show you that through that which I had written and demonstrated to you. I'm also going to explain the commandments of men from that which I had written when I first made a show of the religions or of the books of the prophets and Islam. Yes, so from the representation that we had before, I'm going to take that to explain the traditions of men. So what are traditions of men then? Because you find Jesus here saying, if we don't teach the doctrine, because the doctrine, remember, I said the doctrine is the reconciling factor, is the reconciling law, is the universal law, which is by guiding every messenger or every book written in the name of God, or every law stated in the name of God at various places at different times as well. Whatever time that a man is going to speak, or a spirit, whether it be an angel, is going to speak to men, it should be guided by the doctrine. But however, they are replacing the doctrine and teaching the commandments of men. And what are commandments of men? Commandments of men are things that are done at different places of religion, things that are done, guidance is given, commandments given, knowledge given by a particular dispensation of a religion. All those things, they are titled a commandment of man. So you are going to see that, say Moses, for instance, during his time, the Jews were meant to do certain activities. Say, for instance, they would do the law of Moses. They would also worship through the tent of congregation. They would also do all rites of worshiping through that which was directed to them of Moses. So all those commandments which were given, all the knowledge which was given, for instance, the knowledge, you might find them believing that God actually resided inside the Holy of Holies of the tent of congregation. That alone is a knowledge, but it's a commandment of man, because that knowledge would pass through the use of man. I'm going to show you why I'm using men to describe religion, because that's basically what's there in the scriptures. So that's where I will take you through later on to show you why then a religion is referred to as a man in the scriptures. Religion is ministering inside the progression of many other religions, either which have come before it or which will come after it. But all these religions would progress through time until that we are able to get to the true light, or we are able to get to heaven. In other words, a religion is ministering us a way to heaven. However, it is doing it through portrayals, through modelings, through giving us guidance. And in that guidance, religion is going to state certain laws, certain knowledge, certain practices that are done by believers as confirming their belief to a particular religion, or strengthening the law during such a time of the existence of that religion. So when a religion is existing, people are meant to be given commandments. For instance, also, you are going to see during the tenure of the apostles, people were given commandments for to do, people were given traditions for to practice. Whatever knowledge that they were given during that time, all that can actually be summarized as a tradition of men or commandments of men. They are commandments given by men of angels for to do. And you're actually going to see that all religions are guided and superscribed by angels. It's angels which deliver messages or laws or commandments given inside religion. And these commandments, they would be different. For instance, you are going to see that Moses' commandments are different from the commandments given during the tenure of the apostles, or during the preachings of or teachings of Jesus. Or Islam itself, it does have different traditions from those which are practiced by the apostles. These commandments, they actually differ depending on where a man is ministering, depending on what proof or what guidance that man seeks to give, or what proof of or what guidance that religion seeks to give. Remember, as I mentioned, these are a progression. They are progressing from time to time so that we can get to the ultimate desired goal, that is to get to the true light or to get to heaven. So our journey being so much lengthy, being so much of a journey wherein we are portraying something spiritual, something much more complex, we are meant then to do a lot of vain activities inside religions. So you are going to see that we have so many of these religions here on earth. We have so many of religions that men would do and practice. And inside the practice of those religions, they would be given commandments They would be given guidances. They would be given things for to do as confirming that you have believed. So if you have believed, you would confirm your belief through practice, through submission, through existing within these religions and knowledge as well. So now I'm going to explain these commandments further in relation to men, and then read through scriptures to show you where and how these traditions would exist in the scriptures, so that people would know. Surely when then you hear Jesus saying, you are not supposed to replace the commandment of God, that is the doctrine of God, with commandments of men. Or you are not supposed to replace doctrine by commandments of men or by traditions of men. What is it then that will be shared? In the other aspect, maybe, before I go there where I want to go to explain men as religion, right? Because you are going to see in that explanation that I'm going to give, that all these religions can actually be titled the ministration of men, M-A-N or M-E-N, because that's the time when men would minister. And in those dispensations, in those religions, we are actually going to find then the title commandment of men or tradition of men. It's men practicing activities, confirming their belief or their acceptance to a certain religion or to a certain message given of God at a particular point in time and place as well. So places are different. You may find that the globe itself is very big. You may find people in the upper hemisphere or in the lower hemisphere, the African tradition, and all sorts of religions that would be practiced. Greek mythology or Roman mythology, appeasement of gods, either up there or even down here in Africa. People would do all sorts of those activities. But to measure those activities or to understand them better, you can only understand them by the doctrine of Jesus Christ. If we have the doctrine, we can then evaluate them. But without the doctrine, we cannot know all these messengers. Without the doctrine, we are actually going to be teaching traditions as the commandment of God. And whenever we do that, we are going to be performing a great travesty, because the traditions themselves, they are being given at different places in the progression. Themselves, they are not the law, but themselves, they interpret the law. They are interpreted in light of the law. Also, they increase the evidences of the law. So that's basically the purpose of the traditions given at a particular time. They are a law which are given to men, or a commandment given to men to confirm their belief, also to increase the evidences of the doctrine. So it's the other way around. The doctrine interprets the commandments of men, but the commandments of men cannot be used or given to replace the doctrine. That's the law that Jesus said, and that's the law that will guide everyone who should come and teach the things of God. So if you ever teach these traditions of men, you are going to, first, according to what Jesus stated, you are going to make men worship God in vain. Then secondly, also, we are going to send a confusion, because the messengers of God would not agree in one, because they are given different traditions for to do, depending on their place in time in the evidences of the progression. So I've made a mentioning of the traditions of men, and also now I'm going to explain why I stated that a religion is actually a man in the scriptures. A religion is either man, it can be classified as just men, as men, M-A-N, or men, M-E-N, right? So whatever time a religion is being practiced, is it also going to follow the characteristics or traits of a man? Men are meant to be born at a particular place in time, and men are different from one man to another. Men are divided into nations. You find whites, you find blacks, you find Indians, and all sorts of other races where men would exist and function in, right? So man is born, man will practice in his time, he will labor in his time, and will reap whatever he had in his time. But men would actually pass away. Men come and go. Men rise and fall. Men come at different time intervals. Men exist during his time intervals. And during those times where man is in existence, men have his own realities which he believes in. Men in the Middle East have his own realities. Men in China, for instance, have his own realities. Men existing in Africa have his own realities. As the African tradition would guide them, they would be given realities of life around that which they believed. So the realities of life also of a man who would believe in the Roman mythology, for instance, he have a different perspective, because he have his own things that would guide him to make propitiation for the gods or to make appeasement of the gods. So a man in Africa also had a different perspective altogether. If he want to invoke the gods, he would do it differently. I'm just stating man as he would exist on the globe, to say man does have his own realities. And these traits of man, as I'm trying to describe them, they are the ones which guide religions. A man is given to a language, a man is given to a tongue, right? Men among themselves would speak a tongue which they understand at their different place. Men are also guided by the physical locations on the globe. Men in Africa would exist in Africa. Men in Europe would exist also in Europe. Men in the Americas would also exist there and function within their community. And these things are done of God, but they are describing also the activities of men in light of what I'm trying to teach now, which is titled religion, right? So that's man as I've described him, and you're also going to see that this is what was being said in the books of the scriptures. When Jesus was teaching of men, that's what he meant. He meant religions. When the books of, for instance, the books of Ecclesiastes were trying to explain, they were explaining men, but this explanation or whatever that was written on the behalf of men in that time, it actually meant a description of religions. So religions would labor, religions would eat and enjoy that which God gave them at that particular point in time. Religions would die, whether they be righteous or whether they be unjust. Religions would come and go. It's the same again with men, and a just man and unjust man, all of them would come and live and die. That's what it meant. So you're all actually going to see that we can say the ministration of the apostles is a ministration of men at that particular point in time. And in the same ministration, you're actually going to get different men. Either the book of James is a different man, the book of Galatians, the book of Corinthians, all those are men appearing at different places in the progression of the ministration. The same again, you're going to see the ministration in the Gospels, the ministration of the prophets. There are men appearing at different places, heralding a message at their place in time. And as such, men would have different realities during their ministration. You can also take it to the Quran itself. It's a man existing. It's a religion existing, which would pass away. So these things which I'm mentioning to say the ministration, say for the ministration of the apostles would pass away, I'm also going to show you, because I'm going to zero in on the ministration of the apostles so that I can help clarify the things to do with the doctrine of Jesus Christ. Because the ministration of the apostles and the Gospels, is the one which gave birth to the ministration of to Christianity. And all sects of Christianity, actually, they are extracting their doctrine from that ministration, teaching for doctrine the commandments of men. So I'm also going to look into the commandments of men as expressed in the book of the Apostles and in the Gospels. But for now, let me just finish off the aspect which I've started on, to say men are the ones which are being shown by the transition of these religions. However, men would practice all these vanities, as said also the preacher, that they are vanities of vanities. Men would come and go, there is no end to his laboring. A just man and a man who is not just, they will all die or they will all pass away, and another man would come after them. Whether that man will be wise or whether that man will be just, that's an evil that God created, which is there actually because of the progression. Because the ministration of Jesus, for instance, would only be understood by they which believe. And they which believe are the ones which would be able to appreciate the ministration that would come after, say Islam itself. The ministration of the Quran would actually be appreciated by they which had believed in Jesus. They which had not believed in Jesus would not also appreciate, if they had not believed in Jesus, they would not appreciate anything else that will come after. So Christianity also would come also and exist as a religion because of that which have been believed and understood from the ministration of the apostles. So these religions would be allowed of God to coexist, however, without harmony, without each understanding fully what they are doing, because that's basically what religion is men doing things which they don't understand, men doing practices which they don't understand, but they rely on the message to say, we have been given this message of the angel of God, of the inspiration of God, therefore we're going to do whatever that we have been instructed for to do within this religion, waiting ultimately for the ultimate light that will be brought of God. So that's basically religion. But the era of religion is the era of men. The era of religion is the era of vanity of vanities, men laboring, and there will be no end in his laboring. Each man dying and another man coming. That speaks of the progression from religion to another religion. But however, all of them not knowing what they are doing. When then the light was going to come, the ultimate gathering of men together, men were then going to be able to be told what they were doing inside religion. And this is the era wherein we are now. That's why you see confusion also brewing, because it's the era that is supposed to answer to knowledge, to answer to the gathering of all men together, to answer and bring harmony to the religions. Okay, so now I will just state to say that which I mentioned concerning men and also concerning religions, because it's one and the same thing according to what I mentioned. You are also going to be reading through the scriptures to understand these things, or maybe to familiarize with them as we go. But here I'm just giving you the outline or a general framework so that you can understand and appreciate how the scriptures were written and also how the messengers of God will progress from time to time. So let me just mention to say religion as man was supposed to come and go, right? And he was also going to practice within his space or within his time. He was only going to practice within a part of his ministration. Because remember, as I mentioned, this is a progression, but each man is supposed to act within his part or within his portion. So man is supposed to have a part. Man also is supposed to have his own tongue or his language. Those are the tongues. He is also supposed to have his realities, which he believed in, or his ways of understanding, or knowledge or understanding given to him at a particular point in time. So these are the things that guide men. Also, the fact that men would come and go, I mentioned about it, would also bring another understanding to say every religion was not meant to be forever. A religion was only meant to guide people until either it itself dies and another man comes, or until when the fullness of the light is going to come of God. That is when men will be gathered to God, as also says the scriptures. So these traits or these characteristics, I've just mentioned them so that I can then prove that the ministration of the apostles or that which is contained in the Gospels and the ministration of the apostles were a thing passing by, right? First, I'm going to read from that which was mentioned of the ministers themselves, that which was mentioned in the scriptures of this ministration. I'm going to read from the book of, first of all, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, to explain this which I've just said, to say that men were ministering something that was passing by. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 from verse 1, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass and a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains and have not charity, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burnt, and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. Then from verse 8, charity never faileth, but whether there be prophecies, they shall fail, whether there be tongues, they shall cease, whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. So this is the things that I'm trying to mention concerning the ministration of the apostles. First, they are actually stating that every man is going to prophesy in part, or is going to act that portion of his in the progression, because we all need each other. We all need these parts together, knit together, so that we can come to God, or we can extract the position in the doctrine. But every man in his ministration is going to have a part only. Is going to prophesy in part. Whatever knowledge that then is in that ministration will be passing away. Whether they be tongues, they will pass away. Just, I think, as you have also noted through time, that the languages also, they actually evolve through time. Some of them dying out completely. If you take the English language as it was spoken in the maybe 12th century, or maybe 12th, 11th, and 10th century, it was a totally different language from that which is being spoken today. In other ways, we can actually tell that their language faded away. The same again with the ministrations, which would come also, say for in this instance, the ministration of the apostles. Their tongues would actually also pass away. In other words, it means we cannot relate to that which was written directly. Instead, it should be interpreted, because it's a different tongue altogether to that which we speak now. That's why then you find another law in the same books of the apostles teaching that when you are then come to the kingdom, when you are then come together, it was a prophecy of the law which would actually act out when the gathering of men together would come, that none would be allowed to speak in tongues. All these things that were spoken inside the ministration of religions would be interpreted. The tongues, as they were spoken of in the times of the Quran, in the times of Moses, or in the times of the prophets, these are tongues. They should be interpreted. Those are the tongues that should be interpreted when we are come to the kingdom. Not anything else that men are trying to do, or whatever spirit is trying to bring up. No, all those things are lies. What was being referred to as tongues there is the realities of men inside their administration. Whether they be knowledge, as it is being stated here in the scripture that I've just read, it was going to pass away. Whether they be tongues, whether they be prophecies, because they are prophesying their part or their portion. So we are actually going to see, maybe these are the things that I'm also going to demonstrate later on, that religions were actually like men given a map, but however, we're not given the whole map altogether. Each and every one is given a part of that map, or a portion of that body of the map, so that when we then are going to be gathered together through knowledge, we are actually going to bring in, through the bringing of all those knowledges together, we are going to then have the full and comprehensive map we should guide us to God. We are actually going to be guided towards God, as it has been promised of God, that we are all going to be brought to the light. And that light comes when each is going to bring his piece together. No man is going to have a full measure, no. Because remember, men are portraying the things of the truth. Men are not able to fully, at one go, have that message compacted together. Otherwise, men would be taught through the bits and pieces of the same message being portrayed at different places, however guided by the doctrine, because the doctrine is the universal law. It is the one that will tell us what men are doing. So, yes, the ministrations of the apostles, it was a passing ministration from these things that are stated. Also, you hear also in other portions, 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 2, to say, if a man think he knoweth anything, he knoweth nothing as he ought to know, right? Men would know only in part, as we can also synchronize this to that which was stated before. That men would know in part, when that which is perfect, the perfect now is the gathering of men all together. When that which is perfect is come, men's knowledge should pass away. Men's knowledge should then be interpreted in light with that which is more perfect than him. I maybe allude to the fact that okay, Makosa. So yeah, I want to also state that the other reason why men would pass away is the fact that over and above him being a part, over and above him being something that was passing by, the ministration of the apostles, it was a ministration done in the third day. It's a third day ministration. What am I saying by this? I'm just going to read the scriptures to show you why it's titled the third day ministration, or the ministration done in the on the third day, right? Let me read the scriptures to say, when Jesus was teaching, he actually had stated to the disciples that the Son of Man would be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth before his resurrection, right? As Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly. Therefore, the Son of Man would be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. This was stated in the book of Matthew chapter 12, verses 40 to verse 40. Let me just read verse 40. For as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. However, this was not so with Jesus when he was buried. In the portrayal of it, that is, when then Jesus rose from the dead, the third day, it was something that would happen in the progression to his ultimate realization of that which he had spoken. To the ultimate realization would happen after all religions are done. However, before he could resurrect, his resurrection would be preached, say, in the third day ministration, because Jesus then rose the third day. After Friday, after 2 days and 2 nights in the grave, he resurrected the third day. That's exactly what happened. I'm going to read, because some maybe may not have realized this before. Let me just read the book of Luke chapter 24, verse 19. And he said unto them, what things? And they said unto him, concerning Jesus of Nazareth, which was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people. And now the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death, and have crucified him. But we trusted that it had been he which should have redeemed Israel. And beside all this, today is the third day since these things were done. So actually, this was the third day after Jesus had been crucified. So Jesus rose the third day early in the morning on a Sunday. This also is corroborated with that which Jesus himself spake when he was then teaching after his resurrection. The same book, Luke chapter 24, verse 46, and he said unto them, thus it is written, and thus it behoved Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead the third day, and that repentance and remission of sins should be preached in his name among the nations, beginning at Jerusalem, and you are witnesses of these things. And behold, so I just wanted the verse 46, which stated that he rose from the dead the third day. So what am I saying concerning the ministrations that then came after the ministrations of the apostles? These ministrations, they ministered this same Jesus, which rose the third day. In other words, they ministered Jesus who rose from the dead to preach about his resurrection before his resurrection. Because his resurrection would happen after 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. So where did the apostles mention this? Let's read the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 15. I can just read let me just read from verse 1. Moreover, brethren, I declare unto you the gospel which I preached unto you, which also ye have received, and wherein you stand, which also you have, by which also you are saved, if you keep in memory what I preached unto you, unless you have believed in vain. For I delivered unto you first of all that which I also received, how that Christ died for your sins according to the scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he rose again the third day according to the scriptures. So this also is validating that Apostle Paul was preaching of a Jesus who rose the third day. In other words, he was preaching of his resurrection before that it could be accomplished. And his ultimate resurrection, the 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, would happen, I'm stating, after all the religions were done, right? This is because all religions, remember, were outside the resurrection, are outside from, they are not at the point of the true light. So the resurrection of the dead, actually it preaches the true light, it preaches the last day, it preaches the coming of people, or of men to God. So, and it also preaches the end of the ministration of religions. While the ministration of religions is lasting, we're still talking of an era before his true resurrection. So the same again with the ministration of the apostles. It was before his true resurrection, and therefore it was passing by, as according to that which also Paul was stating, to say it was a ministration where even his knowledge would pass away. He was a man, and a man would know in part, and by knowing in part also, he would prophesy his part, and therefore after that his part is done, it would pass away. It was never going to stay forever, because also, as validated by this point as well, it was a third-day ministration. The other thing also that can also come to support this, I will just add, is the fact that it was before the true resurrection, right? Though, of course, in some portions it would mention to say, you have been resurrected, as in the book of Ephesians chapter 2. They say, you all who have been resurrected. Yes, there is such a portrayal of a resurrection to they which believed it, that ministration. But it was not yet the ultimate or the promised resurrection, because it was in the third day, remember, as I've said. Also, it was not something which is perfect, because God had promised of a kingdom which was going to last forever. God had promised of a kingdom whose riches were never going to pass away. However, these ministrations were passing away according to that which was mentioned of those which were in these ministrations. You hear also as Apostle Paul saying that he was also waiting, he was also eagerly working towards the resurrection of the dead. he was not yet attained unto the resurrection of the dead. So in that case, it was a passing ministration. This is the point that I also want to add concerning the resurrection. Since the resurrection would actually ultimately be shown in the book of Revelation, that the first resurrection would happen from the dead side. So this also seeks to confirm that during the time of the ministration of the apostles, the true resurrection had not been attained. Therefore, it was a passing ministration. So whoever then is going to be found teaching anything else from this ministration of the apostles, say teaching from ministration of the apostles, purposing all those things that are given as commandments to be the commandment of God, that such an one is found to be erring from the way, because those things were passing, they were a part, they cannot be used to evaluate the whole. They cannot be used to evaluate, say, the ministration of Prophet Muhammad. They cannot be used to evaluate the Quran. If you do that, you're actually going to be in error. And that's why you have divisions this day, because people are teaching for doctrine the commandments of men. Commandments and traditions, as mentioned by Apostle Paul, they were only given then in that era in time to make proof, to gather the evidences, only to communicate to the doctrine, so that people would understand further, would be able to gather more concerning that which was given to that man at that particular point in time. In other words, men were supposed to eat and drink and enjoy of the labor, of the gift that God gives him. However, all that was going to be passing away. Therefore, you cannot use that which is passing away as a law of a kingdom which would remain. It was something that would appear only in the way or in the progression, but not a station itself. It was never a station. Therefore, everyone who is teaching everyone who is teaching in error is teaching that which was stated of our apostles as a doctrine. In other words, they are actually causing people to pray or to worship God in vain, because they are replacing the doctrine by that which is supposed to pass away, that which is a tradition, that which is a commandment of men. I just sought to establish this as a point to show us how and why we are having divisions. Why is the law of God interpreted as variable? Why are we being sectorial? Churches at this place, churches at this other place. Is because people don't understand the doctrine, or they have neglected the doctrine, and they are teaching commandments of men for doctrine. And these commandments of men, they are actually a spectrum. You're actually going to find them extracting from the teachings of Moses up unto the ministration of the apostles. And in all that, they extract whatever they want. Someone will be teaching things that are stated in the law of Moses. The other one is teaching things that are stated in the ministration of the apostles, purposing that to be the law of God. However, as they do so, they send confusion. They are not going then to be able to reconcile with that which was ministered, for instance, in the Quran, which is stated to be an enlightenment to the things that Jesus ministered. So that's why we have these divisions. That's why we have these problems. Over and above to my mentioning of the doctrine as the reconciling factor, I will also add to say that the doctrine itself, it will lead us into many other facets of life. It actually answers to every facet of human existence, be it knowledge gathered in science, knowledge gathered in art, knowledge gathered in astronomy, all that knowledge which was gathered of men. It's also knowledge which was gathered which can only be understood in light of the doctrine itself. So the doctrine does permeate into all facets of life, because remember, our God being one is the same hand which blesses us, is the same hand which then extends itself to all the facets of life that we have, whether they be controversial theories, for example, the theory of evolution. To understand that which was stated there, we can only understand it in light of our full and complete understanding of the doctrine. The doctrine does permeate into all those facets. It is a universal guide. That statement still remains. It's the universal law to man. It tells man his purpose. It tells man where he is supposed to go. So now that we have stated why we have divisions, is because men are teaching for doctrine other things. Men are replacing the doctrine. We will need then to move forward to have me introduce the things to do with the doctrines. As stated in the scripture that I read, there are 6 principles of that doctrine, 6 foundational guidances to that doctrine. I will be teaching those foundational guidances to the principle. And those are the things that are going to lead us into understanding further the things of God, and also bringing harmony and rapport to men and peace among religions and among nations of whatever existence they are. They are all supposed to come out together in the light of understanding that their God is one. He who made them is one. The one who created all things, the sustainer of us all. Thank you.